Imagine you are down to, like, your absolute last bowl of rice.
Oh, wow. So total crisis mode.
Exactly. Total crisis. Your family is starving. And then the leader of your community walks into the room. So do you feed yourself? Do you feed your kid? Or, do you give the food to the leader?
I mean, human instinct says you feed the kid,
Right. But according to this really brief, incredibly dense manifesto written back in 2009 by a figure named Suofeng for a group called Lifechanyuan, the answer is none of the above. You actually bypass your own child, you bypass the leader, and you hand that very last meal to the person who built the dining room.
Yeah, and that specific mandate, I mean, it fundamentally breaks our conventional understanding of how human beings behave in a crisis.
It really does. It's just wild to think about.
It is, because when resources vanish, biology usually dictates that we prioritize our immediate genetic kin, right? Or sociology dictates we defer to the person holding the most power in the room.
Right, exactly.
Yet this text, it completely rewires that baseline survival instinct. It demands that the absolute highest value be placed purely on foundational labor.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a truly staggering piece of translated source material today.
Seriously, it's a fascinating document.
It really is. It's a letter dated September 27, 2009, and it's addressed to a community known as Lifechanyuan, or as it's referred to internally, the second home.
Right, for the second home.
Yes. And our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the anatomy of this document. We want to understand how a text of fewer than 300 words manages to completely re-engineer human nature.
Which is no small feat.
Definitely not. And it does this using gratitude, duty, and spiritual economics to bind a community together so tightly that they would willingly starve for each other. So, as you're listening, I want you to think about the communities or the organizations you belong to and how those groups define who is the most valued and how they're rewarded. Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you look at the opening line of this letter, Suofeng completely disarms the reader before ever introducing those life or death stakes.
Yeah, the opening is so striking.
It is. He writes, "Dear brothers, sisters, relatives, and lovers of our home."
What's fascinating here is how that single sentence systematically dismantles the psychological defenses we usually bring into any structured organization.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, I mean, think about it. When you join a company, or even a traditional religious congregation, there is an understood distance. You have colleagues, managers, maybe fellow congregants.
Right, there's always a boundary.
Exactly. But by weaponizing the words relatives, and specifically lovers, Suofeng is forcing this massive collapse of psychological distance. You aren't just sitting next to a co-religionist. Your identities are fundamentally intertwined.
Yeah, that word lovers is really what stopped me in my tracks.
It's intense.
It is. It's like reading the opening of a massive family reunion invitation crossed with, I don't know, a deep spiritual retreat.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, if you are listening to this on your commute or at your desk right now, just look around at your coworkers and imagine a corporate memo referring to all of you as lovers of our home.
Yeah, HR would definitely have a field day with that.
Oh, 100%. It sounds deeply uncomfortable to an outsider. But internally, it instantly flattens the hierarchy. It creates this horizontal plane of radical intimacy.
And establishing that flat, intimate ground is a deliberate rhetorical strategy because it makes the vertical hierarchy he introduces in the very next breath that much more powerful.
Right, because you're already disarmed.
Exactly. Once you feel completely equal and endlessly loved by everyone around you, you are far more receptive to being told who actually sits above you.
And he doesn't waste any time establishing that ceiling either, because right after that, Suofeng points out that this warm, welcoming second home only exists thanks to two key factors.
Right.
The first is the grace of ancestral Buddha, the greatest creator, and the second is the selfless dedication of the meritorious contributors. I mean, he is putting the ultimate divine force and the earthly laborers into the exact same sentence.
That's a massive elevation, and we really have to look closely at the mechanics of that phrasing.
Yeah.
Because he isn't merely offering a generic thank you to the volunteers who built the compound.
Right, it's much heavier than that.
He is actively bridging the divine and the earthly realms.
Yeah.
By labeling these builders as meritorious contributors, and later in the text referring to them as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of today, Suofeng is sanctifying physical labor.
Wow.
Yeah, he's pulling divinity out of the sky and placing it directly into the hands of the people pouring the concrete.
Oh, wait, I want to push back on that a little bit.
Sure.
Because in so many spiritual traditions we study, the highest virtue is usually contemplation. right? Or prayer, or asceticism, like removing yourself from the dirt and grime of worldly concerns.
Right, the monk on the mountain kind of idea.
Exactly. But here, he explicitly praises them for devoting their precious youth and valuable time and boundless energy selflessly to the construction of the home. He is essentially canonizing sweat equity.
Canonizing sweat equity is a perfect way to phrase it. This text tells the community that the sacred isn't abstract.
Right.
The sacred is the person sitting next to you who sacrificed their physical prime to build the roof over your head. I mean, this is a mechanism for ensuring long-term community stability.
How so?
Well, if a spiritual group only rewards silent meditation, nothing physical ever gets built, and the group eventually collapses from practical neglect. By elevating construction to a state of divine grace, Lifechanyuan ensures its own physical survival while fulfilling its members' spiritual needs.
That makes a lot of sense. But you can't just mandate that people treat their fellow carpenters and farmers like literal deities in a vacuum.
Right, you need a justification.
Yeah, you have to convince the community that the work these contributors did was an absolute matter of life and death. And Zuifeng does this by painting a truly terrifying picture of the alternative.
He really is.
He writes that these contributors followed the guide to create a spiritual oasis, our second home, amidst the desolate plains of human hearts.
And that evocative metaphor is doing an immense amount of heavy lifting for the community's structural integrity.
Yeah, it's very poetic, but also very stark.
It is. What Swiving is deploying there is a sociological mechanism known as boundary maintenance. For the second home to possess supreme, unquestionable value, the primary home, meaning the rest of human society, must be perceived not just as flawed, but as completely devoid of life.
But isn't that just extreme pessimism, though? I mean, calling the rest of humanity a desolate plain feels like a very dark worldview for a community built on love.
It does seem contradictory at first, but the darkness is the structural engine of their loyalty.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. If the outside world is perceived as generally fine-like, maybe a little stressful but manageable, then the immense sacrifice of those meritorious contributors seems entirely disproportionate.
Right. Why give up everything for just a slight upgrade?
Exactly. Why surrender your precious youth to build an oasis if you're already living in a lush forest? By framing the primary world as a barren, toxic wasteland, the text reframes the contributors. They're no longer just builders.
They're saviors.
Yes, saviors. They provided the only source of spiritual water in an endless desert.
Which means leaving the oasis isn't just a change of scenery. Leaving is spiritual death.
Precisely.
And that makes Suifeng's next action in the text feel so much more calculated and profound. Because after laying out this grand narrative of saviors in a desert, he writes, "We are profoundly grateful to you, our meritorious contributors. I, Suifeng, bow to you and thank you for your tremendous contributions to humanity."
That's a huge shift.
It is. The architect of the entire philosophy is physically lowering himself to the people who move the dirt.
And structurally, a leader bowing to a follower is a massive disruption of the expected flow of power.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in traditional organizations, gratitude and reverence flow upward. The employees thank the CEO for the job, the congregation thanks the guru for the wisdom.
Right.
By reversing that flow, Suifeng reinforces the community's absolute core value: labor, physical sacrifice, and devotion to the group's infrastructure outrank even the founder's ego.
It essentially proves to the reader that the hierarchy isn't based on arbitrary titles. It's based on tangible, measurable contribution.
Yes.
I mean, if you're listening to this and trying to map it onto your own life, think about the last time the head of your organization genuinely, publicly subordinated themselves to the entry-level workers who keep the lights on.
It almost never happens.
It never happens, which is why it generates such intense loyalty when it does. But, it's one thing to say, "I bow to you," when the sun is shining and everyone is fed. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, the real test.
Exactly. The text pivots from poetic, performative praise into brutal, practical rules of survival. It quotes a proverb: "When drinking water, never forget the one who dug the well."
Which is a classic idiom, deeply embedded in many cultures. It's meant to remind people to honor their origins and the ancestors who paved the way for their current comfort.
True, but Wu Fang isn't using it as a quaint reminder to say thank you. He uses it to introduce a terrifying directive.
He really does.
He states, "As long as we have even one meal left, we must first offer it to the meritorious contributors." We touched on this at the very beginning of our deep dive, but we really need to sit with the gravity of that rule.
It is intense.
It's like a structural load test in engineering. You don't actually know if a bridge will hold until you drive a fleet of semi-trucks over it to see if the concrete cracks. Swiffing is taking the ultimate human desperation, starvation, and driving it over the bridge of community loyalty to see if it holds.
That load test metaphor perfectly captures the mechanism at work here. This directive completely strips away any philosophical abstraction. It grounds their entire spiritual belief system in brutal physical reality.
Yeah, you can't fake it when you're starving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He is preempting the exact moment when intentional communities usually fracture. Because when resources run out, human beings panic. They form factions, they hoard, they turn on each other.
It's just survival instinct.
Right. By establishing the one meal left rule during a time of peace, he is hardwiring a crisis protocol into their theology.
Wait, I have to stop you there. I understand the crisis protocol aspect, but the justification he gives for this rule is jarring.
Oh, yeah. The heavenly way part.
Yeah. He writes, "Those who have given should receive. Those who have given much should receive much. This reflects the fairness of the heavenly way." Now, this sounds completely counter to almost every major global religion or utopian commune we usually see. Normally, spiritual utopias preach radical egalitarianism.
Right. The idea that everyone gets an equal share.
Exactly, regardless of what they contributed, because everyone has inherent worth. But this isn't equality at all. It sounds like cutthroat spiritual capitalism.
And this raises a really important question about the difference between equality and fairness, at least according to the physics of Lifechanyuan. You are absolutely correct. This text explicitly rejects radical egalitarianism.
Wow.
What Su Feng is establishing is a strict, merit-based spiritual economy. The community operates on the premise that absolute equality is actually a threat to survival.
How so?
Well, if the person who did nothing gets the exact same final bowl of rice as the person who sacrificed their youth to build the walls, you breed deep structural resentment.
Oh, I see. You essentially disincentivize hard work. Why dig the well if you get the same amount of water as the person who slept all day?
Precisely the danger they are avoiding. The heavenly way, as described in this letter, isn't a charity. It's a ruthless accounting system based on effort. Earthly fairness must perfectly mirror spiritual law.
Wow.
Proportionality is the highest virtue. If you gave much, you receive much. This ensures that the people holding the physical integrity of the community together are protected at all costs.
It is a brilliant survival mechanism.
It really is. If the well diggers die of starvation, the entire community dies of thirst shortly after. Protecting them isn't just polite, it's a collective survival imperative.
And he also elevates the act of handing over that food from a mere transaction into a test of personal purity.
Right.
He says offering that last meal showcases the nobility of our character. So you aren't just feeding someone else, you are actively proving your own moral worth to the universe.
Exactly.
But I mean, even with all of that noble framing, human beings still have a deeply ingrained instinct for self-preservation. You can only give away your last meal so many times before you start asking, well, what about me? What do I get out of this?
Which brings us to the masterful closing argument of the letter. This is where Wefeng completely resolves the tension between self-sacrifice and self-preservation.
Yes, the payoff. He writes that serving these contributors, alleviating their worries, and ensuring they enjoy their twilight years is actually a means of accumulating wealth for our journey to the heavenly kingdom. He urges the community to remember that those who give will gain, while those who do not give will not gain. And then he lands on this absolute paradox of a closing line. He says, if we act in this way, the ultimate beneficiaries will be ourselves.
So clever.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at a text demanding extreme selflessness, like giving away your youth, deferring to others, surrendering your literal last meal to someone else. And yet the text concludes with a promise of ultimate self-benefit.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of how human incentive structures work, we see a perfectly closed loop system here.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Think about the chronic risk of burnout in any high-demand environment. If leadership constantly demands that members sacrifice purely for the sake of an abstract greater good or for the benefit of someone else, eventually the psychological gas tank runs empty.
Yeah, pure altruism is incredibly difficult to sustain over a lifetime.
Exactly.
It eventually feels like exploitation. If I am constantly giving and someone else is constantly receiving, I'm going to want out of that system.
Exactly. The failure point Shui Feng is engineering around. By framing service to the meritorious contributors as the exact mechanism for accumulating wealth for your own personal journey to the heavenly kingdom, he aligns individual self-interest with group survival.
Oh, that is wild.
The paradox dissolves. You aren't losing your bowl of rice. You are converting that physical bowl of rice into spiritual currency and depositing it directly into your own cosmic bank account.
That reframing changes the entire emotional experience of the sacrifice. You don't feel like a victim of starvation. You feel like a savvy spiritual investor.
Spot on.
By taking care of the people who built the community, you believe you are fundamentally securing your own ultimate salvation. The incentive to serve others becomes completely indistinguishable from the desire to save yourself.
And the community has engineered an environment where everyone is highly motivated to protect the most valuable members. The overarching unspoken message is this: the second home will only survive the desolate plains if every single person believes that their own personal path to heaven requires keeping the well-diggers alive.
Wow.
It is a phenomenal example of using spiritual doctrine to solve complex logistical and psychological problems within a closed group.
Man, let's take a step back and look at the sheer distance we've traveled in this single document.
There's a lot of ground covered.
It really is. In fewer than 300 words, Shuofeng grabbed his readers with the intimate embrace of lovers. He elevated everyday construction workers to the status of modern-day Buddhas, placing them right next to the greatest creator. He painted the outside world as a desolate wasteland to lock in the value of the community. He established a brutal load test of loyalty by demanding the last meal be given to the workers. And finally, he wrapped this intense culture of sacrifice in a promise that giving everything away is actually the best way to get everything you want. It completely redefines the concept of merit.
And it serves as a powerful lens for examining any group dynamic, even outside of intentional spiritual communities.
Very true.
Every organization has well-diggers, right? The people who built the foundation. The ones whose early sacrifices make the current comfort possible.
It really makes you evaluate the spaces you navigate every day. If you think about your own workplace, your family structure, or your social circles, how does your community define a meritorious contributor?
Exactly.
And more importantly, what happens to those people when the resources run low? When the budget gets slashed or times get hard, do the people who built the foundation get the last meal? Or are they the first ones forgotten in favor of the people currently holding the titles?
That's the real test. The way a group distributes its final resources tells you everything you need to know about its true theology.
Yeah.
And looking at the sheer efficiency of Shuofeng's model leaves us with a final, perhaps slightly uncomfortable thought to ponder. If an entire community operates on the fundamental belief that serving others is essentially just the method for accumulating spiritual wealth for oneself, does pure selflessness actually exist within that system? Or has the community simply figured out a perfectly optimized way to make selfishness benefit absolutely everyone?
A perfectly optimized system of selfishness. It makes you realize that true community building is as much about managing human psychology as it is about shared ideals. You might just find yourself wishing your own organization's handbook understood human nature half as well as the heavenly way does. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.